Bill always took pride in doing the right thing. He grew up in a middle-income family and was told that if he worked hard, he could have the life he wanted. His parents coped with difficulties, but worked tirelessly. Bill's mother was a school teacher, and his father was a carpenter. Bill respected their professions, but told himself he would never struggle with adversity like they did when he was growing up. At 30, his dreams almost came true. Bill attended prestigious leagues both as an undergraduate and in law school, where he achieved top grades. After graduation, he passed the bar exam and began working at one of the top law firms on the West Coast. After 5 years of working nights and days, he became a junior partner, confidently moving towards a rich life. However, perhaps what Bill was most proud of was his wife. He considered himself an ordinary-looking man, attractive only when he put on one of his nice suits. Bill was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed 165 pounds, with what could be described as a slight build, with a slightly protruding belly. His wife, Mary, was a completely different story. She was simply a dazzling beauty 5 foot 8 inches tall, with long brown hair and a curvaceous figure that made men drool, large breasts, hips, and butt that gave her the perfect hourglass figure. He was still surprised how he managed to win her. Over time, as he met her, he learned that she had always had a beautiful face, but in her teens, she matured too early, gained a little weight, and acquired breasts before everyone else. The unwanted attention made her quite insecure and strict. Over time, Mary began to feel better about her figure, but some damage was done. That was the main problem. Bill worshipped the ground she walked on, but she wasn't particularly interested in sex. Although she had a figure that many would envy, it was not noticeable from her appearance. She dressed rather casually and overly conservatively. She didn't even wear high heels because she didn't like being taller than Bill. Even on her honeymoon in the Bahamas, she wore a one-piece swimsuit. She was trying to start a real estate business, so her wardrobe consisted mostly of outdated pantsuits and jackets. They still had sex, but it was far from passion. It seemed like she had no sex drive at all. Mary lay there, let Bill move until he was finished, and then rolled over to go to bed. In truth, although they had dated for years when he first started working at the law firm, his commitment to his job meant they didn't have much sex at all. Having become a junior partner, Bill thought that now he would definitely have time to make Mary relax. The only person at work with whom Bill shared his problems was his friend, Terry Cooper. Terry always encouraged Bill to be more adventurous and assertive. In fact, Bill thought that without Terry's pressure, he would never have become a junior partner. They joined the firm together as junior lawyers 5 years ago and have been friends ever since. The couple often ate lunch together, and even though Bill's recent promotion made him technically Terry's boss, it didn't interfere with their friendship. "I just don't know, buddy. Nothing I do helps bring her out of her shell," Bill said over lunch one day. He continued, "She seems to be a bundle of nerves, with her business not growing the way she would like and her general anxiety. If only I could get her out of her head for a while." Bill didn't understand why she was so worried about work. In truth, with his new promotion, she didn't need to work anymore. Mary was someone who gained a lot of her self-worth through her work, and Bill didn't want to take that away from her. Terry listened carefully and waited before answering. "Have you tried talking to her?" "Yes, I tried. I even brought it up in couples therapy sessions. She just says that she is always tired of working hard and that everything she does is for our family." Terry half smiled as he swallowed a bite of his sandwich. "Looks like she needs a smoke or maybe sex," he suggested before taking another bite of his sandwich. While Terry chewed, Bill looked at him thoughtfully. Terry didn't know about their problems in bed, but perhaps he was on the right track. Bill didn't like smoking himself, it just never suited him, but Mary told stories about smoking with her friends in college before going out. "Do you really think this will help?" asked Bill. "I don't think she's used it since college. When I need to turn off my brain for a while, that's what I do." "You can try it." Terry was talking mostly to himself. "Where can I even get this?" asked Bill. "I know it's legal now, so should I just go to the store?" "No, dude, don't do that. I have a guy who breeds special varieties, simply the best of the best, Terry boasted. I'll organize it for you. Give me a couple of days. That same day, Bill went home as usual and thought he would please his wife by giving her dinner. He stopped at the grocery store, bought steaks, baked potatoes, salad, and her favorite wine and drove home. Mary returned home late in the evening. Bill was hoping to surprise her with dinner, but she came into the house in a terrible mood. Another buyer fell through, damn financing. If I don't move some of these things soon, I'm going to lose the contract, she said with desperation in her voice. I'm really sorry, honey. I'm sure everything will work out. What about those clients I referred to you? Are any of them interested in investing? Bill added. That was very nice of you, honey, but the people you referred to me don't actually have enough money to invest in such real estate. I really want the big players, the people with real money, she added, using air quotes. Bill hated that he couldn't help her. Real estate in this town is all about meeting the right people, and Bill wasn't successful enough to move in their circles. Well, I made us dinner, Bill changed the subject. Oh, that's so sweet, honey, but I ate something in the office. I'm so tired, I just want to take a shower and go to bed, she said, taking off the pink jacket she was wearing. Oh, I said disappointedly. Apparently, we will have leftovers for tomorrow. Mary was already halfway upstairs when Bill finished speaking. After putting away the food, Bill followed Mary upstairs to the bedroom and reached for the bathroom door. He heard water running in the shower. Locked. Mary didn't even want him to see her completely naked. Disappointed, Bill changed into his pajamas and went to bed. He laid his head on the pillow and thought about what Ter said and perhaps smoking will help. He really hoped so. The next few days at work were pretty monotonous. Terry often had to travel on client business, so he was not due back until Friday. Bill was preparing to present his team's work to senior partners the following week. This was the first major test since his promotion. The first thing Terry did on Friday morning was to walk into Bill's office and sit down. He handed Bill the completed expense reports for his trip and a small brown paper bag. Inside the bag was a plastic Ziploc bag with a small amount of green leaves. Is this it? Don't we need more? Bill asked his friend. No, sir, Terry said. This is a very special variety. My boyfriend said you'll be the first to try it. He said it would really fire you both up. Since you say so. Thanks, buddy, Bill said, putting the package in his briefcase. Later that evening, at home, Bill sat at the dinner table, trying to remember how to roll a cigarette. After several experiments, he managed to make one passable. Then he began to wait. He decided that he would not mention sex at all. The last thing he wanted was for his wife to feel pressured. He wanted her to relax. Mary returned home around 7:30, dropping her bags in the hallway and going into the kitchen. Hello, dear. She sounded tired. How was your day? Pretty good. I have a little surprise for you. I picked up the rolled-up cigarette in my hand. I think you've been very stressed lately, and you need to let off some steam. Where did you even get this? She asked, half smiling. Terry suggested. We were talking about how you're worried about work, and now it's completely legal, so why not? Mary took the rolled-up cigarette from Bill's fingers. I haven't smoked since college, she said, carefully examining the rolled-up cigarette. Shall we try? I suggested, handing Mary a lighter. Why not? She answered and went out into the backyard. I watched as she took a few puffs from her rolled-up cigarette and then began coughing violently. When she returned to the house, her eyes already looked a little cloudy. A slight smile appeared on her face. I think I could use a nice, long bath right now, she said, stretching. I think it's a great idea, dear. You go relax in the bath, and I'll finish cooking dinner. Okay, darling. Thank you for being so caring. She didn't finish, going upstairs. Bill spent a few minutes preparing the last dishes and setting the table when his phone vibrated. Curious, he picked it up. Message from Mary. Mary, would you kindly bring me a glass of wine? Bill thought. It was a very short bath if she had already gotten out and dressed. He poured a glass of red wine and headed upstairs. She wasn't in the bedroom or the dressing room. The bathroom door was slightly open and the light was on. Bill looked inside and saw Mary's head just above the edge of the bathtub, with her eyes closed. He came closer. For what seemed like an eternity, he stood and looked at his wife's naked body. She didn't use any foam so Bill could see her in all her glory. Since he didn't often see her so clearly, he was impressed by how toned she was, with a flat stomach and a hint of abs under large breasts that seemed larger than he remembered. They sagged slightly, so it was clear that they were real. Her beautiful face looked happy and relaxed, and there was no wrinkle on her forehead. Her brown hair was pulled back into a messy bun, not touching the water. She looked perfect. Bill's wife wasn't usually this naked when they made love. As he stood there, practically drooling all over his wife, she narrowed one eye and looked at him. "Are you going to give me this wine?" she asked with slight playfulness. "Oh, yes," he stammered and handed her the glass. "How do you feel?" he asked, really trying to remember this moment. "I feel great, so warm and relaxed." "Looks like you're having a good time, too." She took a long sip of wine, looking at Bill. Confused, he looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He had an impressive tent effect in his pants. "Oh, I just think I've never seen you so beautiful." She opened her blurry eyes and looked straight at him. "Do you really think so? If it's my fault, then maybe I should take care of it." She was biting her lower lip. Bill looked puzzled. "Do you want to take care of me?" Mary stood up quickly, still completely naked, glistening with water, and looked at Bill. "Of course, dear, let me dry. Sit on the bed, and I'll be there soon." "Okay," Bill said, his voice shaking slightly with shock. He walked away from the bathroom door, not taking his eyes off her naked body. When he left the bathroom, he turned around and tried to undress, which caused him to fall onto the carpet. He got up, got ready, and undressed. Sitting naked on the bed, his mind began to race. He hadn't had sex with Mary in weeks. What did she mean by, "take care of you"? Mary entered the bedroom, still naked from head to toe, stopping for a moment in the doorway, grabbing the frame. The light behind her made her silhouette even more dramatic, her relaxed pose making her body even more appetizing. She let go of the frame and began to walk towards their bed. There was more of a sway in her walk, as if she was proud of her curves. When she reached the bed, Mary crawled towards him. Her face moved closer to his. She craned her neck and kissed him warm, deep, passionately. The kind of kiss that makes your mind go blank. His body instantly relaxed. Mary pulled back, put her hand on Bill's chest, and pushed him until he lay on his back. The next moment, she began to pleasure him. Bill didn't understand where this technique came from. Then they had very wild sex. Completely exhausted, the couple fell asleep right there, naked on top of each other. It was the best night of sleep Bill had had in a long time. The next morning, Bill woke up alone, slightly confused. There was a small note on Mary's bedside table. "Good morning, honey. I have an early meeting. Love you. See you in the evening." Bill jumped up on the bed. He urgently needed to get more of this thing. When he got to the office, he looked everywhere for Terry. He was not there. Checking his schedule, he saw that Terry was out of town on business. Bill picked up the phone and called his friend. He didn't care that it was only 5 in the morning where he was. The friend answered the call sleepily, obviously just woke up. "Hello?" he said, slightly puzzled. "Terry, you were right. I need more of that thing," Bill said, speaking too quickly. "Okay, calm down, buddy. So did it work?" asked Terry. "Believe it or not, call your boyfriend and tell him I'll take everything he has." "I don't care how much it costs." Bill nervously walked around his office. "Wait, dude. I can't get you any more right now. I'm leaving before the end of the week," Terry replied. "Oh, come on. There must be something you can do." "Who is the guy you bought from?" "I'll call him myself," Bill pleaded. Terry paused before answering. "That's not how it works. He's just a college student and doesn't sell to everyone." "Terry, please, you have to help me. Call him and make an appointment. I'll owe you big." Okay, Bill, I'll see what I can do. Don't hope too much. Bill's day consisted of walking around the office, waiting for a call from Terry. Every time his phone rang, disappointment was written all over his face if it was someone else. Bill's perfect life on paper was missing two things. Have a healthy sex life with your wife and children. Perhaps if he can solve the first problem, the second will solve itself. It all seemed to be within his reach. While he was looking out the window of his office, a sharp beep sounded from afar from his smartphone lying on the table. As if in one big leap, Bill crossed the room, grabbed the device, and swiped it to answer. "Tell me the good news, man." On the other end, Terry replied, "You owe me a lot. The guy agreed to meet you at the village tavern. You know that place around the corner where we sometimes have lunch." Bill replied, "Yes, I know. What time?" "30 minutes. Don't be late," Terry said and hung up. The restaurant Terry was talking about was 3 blocks from their office in the center of town. This is one of those soup and sandwich places that is only tolerable but gains a large clientele purely due to proximity. Bill arrived 10 minutes before the appointed time, took a salad, and sat down in the far corner of the eating area with his back to the wall, facing directly towards the entrance. He sat, staring at the door, without touching his food. He had no appetite. Bill didn't really like this place for a drug deal. The chance of meeting a colleague was too great. I hoped that everything would end quickly. The third person to enter the restaurant after he sat down was a young black guy, about 20 years old. The young man looked around the room, found Bill's gaze, walked towards him, sat down, and put his backpack on his lap. "Hey, dude. Terry said you needed to talk to me urgently. I'm Marcus. Thank you very much for meeting with me." "You have no idea how much this means to me," Bill said, nervously. Marcus listened and replied, "It's okay, dude. Listen, I'm actually a trader. I just love experimenting with strains for friends. Terry said something about helping your old lady." Bill quickly replied, "Oh yeah, with her stress at work, she just can't relax. At this point, it's like she's a completely new person." "Yes, I can imagine," Marcus replied with a slight chuckle in his voice. Marcus took the backpack and began to speak in a low voice. "If we're going to do that," he shook his bag slightly, "we'd better go for a walk." "I agree," said Bill. "There is a parking lot nearby. It should be quiet." Just as Bill pushed his chair back to stand, he heard the doorbell ring as a small group entered. His eyes widened, and he bent over to make himself as small as possible. At the deli counter stood 5 of his colleagues and Mr. White, one of the senior partners of his firm. Looks like he invited his team to lunch. From their first day at his law firm, young lawyers were told, "Don't mess with Mr. White." He was the youngest senior partner in the history of the firm, achieving this position at the age of 40. Even after 5 years, he still instilled fear in Bill. Mr. White was responsible for the firm's high-profile clients. He often represented celebrities, athletes, wandering politicians, you name it. He was expensive and had a reputation as a fierce lawyer. If you had money, he was the best of all possible lawyers. Bill never had a personal conversation with Mr. White, but the rumor around the office was that he was a college football star whose career was cut short by a knee injury. He carried his athletic aspirations into a lucrative career as a lawyer, but retained his athletic physique. Perhaps that was the most terrifying thing about him. Mr. White was tall, 6 feet 3 or 4 inches, with a powerful build. He looked better than men half his age. Bill never wanted to be like him because he knew he could never be that person. All these thoughts were running through Bill's head as he watched in horror as Mr. White turned from the counter and met his eyes. His gaze moved from Bill to young Marcus and then back to Bill, with confusion or disappointment on his face. Mr. White began to approach. Bill frantically considered possible plausible explanations for why he was having lunch with a 20-year-old college student. He was shocked when his boss approached the table and addressed Marcus. "Marcus, what are you doing in these parts? Shouldn't you have classes at this time of day?" Marcus looked even more scared than Bill when he finally found the words. I just wanted to grab something to eat, and there weren't any other seats available, so I sat here." Mr. White looked around the half-empty restaurant, then looked back at Marcus before answering. Well, this is complete nonsense. What are you really doing here? Does your mom know where you are? Bill had never heard Mr. White talk to anyone so informally. How did he know this guy? Bill began to speak, but Mr. White interrupted him with one raised finger in his direction. We'll talk about why you're sitting here with my 20-year-old nephew when I say so. Shut your mouth. In the blink of an eye, Mr. White snatched the backpack from Marcus' hands and unzipped the main compartment. He glanced quickly inside. His eyes rose, and he looked at Marcus with obvious fury. Marcus, get up and go to my car, which is parked outside. Don't say a word, or I swear to God you'll regret it. Mr. White gave Bill a look of rage, then turned and followed Marcus out of the restaurant. Bill heard the bell signaling that they were out, but he didn't see it. He stared straight ahead, not looking at anything, but aware of how badly he had just messed up. Marcus's head rested on the passenger window of his uncle's car as they sped through downtown intersections. He closed his eyes and tried to drown out the sounds of his uncle's screams. So that's why I work so hard and pay so much money so you can go to the best schools? So that you give up all this and start selling all sorts of nonsense. And the people who work with me? You must be crazy. What do you think your mom will say? Do you want to end up in prison like the loser who made her baby and ran away? I didn't sell them, Marcus replied. Don't try to be smart. Why were you dating someone you don't even know and you had a backpack full of it? I was just going to give it to him. I didn't want any money. A friend said he was having problems with his wife and this helped her, Marcus continued. Brandon's expression changed slightly. He was still furious, but his gaze had become interested. He let Marcus continue talking. You know that I study chemistry and biology, right? So I started experimenting with different strains to see what effects I could get. Brandon seemed interested in what he was saying. What are the effects? Marcus looked a little unsure, but continued. Well, some make you happy, others make you sad, some give you energy, others put you to sleep. The one I had is brand new and seems to relax people and lower their inhibitions. Bill said that this miracle worked on his wife. Brandon silently stared straight ahead at the road for several seconds. We're going to your apartment, and I'm going to confiscate it all. And pray I don't tell your mom. Marcus knew there was no point in protesting. At least Uncle Brandon didn't seem so angry when he found out he wasn't selling illegal crap. He hoped his uncle wouldn't destroy all his grass. He had worked so hard on it, and there was a lot of it. But none of this mattered then. It's better to accept the punishment like a man and move on. For the rest of the week, Bill was in a panic. He was caught trying to buy a prohibited item from the nephew of his firm's senior partner. The more time passed, the worse it became. Mr. White was never very visible in the office, usually meeting with clients elsewhere. However, Bill hasn't seen him at all this week. Somehow this made everything worse. Bill was sure that he would, at a minimum, be demoted and at worst, fired and taken to court. 3 days in a row in the office and nothing. No call, no email, nothing. Of course, by this point, he would have at least been called into Mr. White's office for some indoctrination. But this did not happen. Bill held on to a small hope that perhaps all of this would go unnoticed. At 4:42 p.m. on Friday, Bill was packing his things to leave the office for the weekend. As he finished, his computer beeped and a notification appeared on his calendar. It was an invitation to a barbecue at Mr. White's house, this Sunday attendance required. Perhaps Mr. White wanted to express his thoughts to him outside the office. Bill knew one thing for sure. He couldn't ignore it. He moved the cursor on the screen and clicked accept. Only after accepting the invitation did Bill see the strange entry in the invitation. Spouses must be present. I still don't understand why I had to come, Mary said, standing on the porch of Mr. White's house. These work events are so boring. I don't know anyone. I have so much work to do. I hope it doesn't take too long. Mary was wearing a simple cocktail dress, nothing special. Bill had never been to Mr. White's house. The house was one of the largest in this prestigious gated community. You couldn't see much from the street, but when you turned into the driveway, it was impossible not to be impressed. I don't know why Mr. White insisted on the presence of the spouses. Perhaps this is some kind of team building. He didn't tell her about the incident with Marcus, hoping Mr. White would keep it a secret between them. It seems strange that although Mary and Bill arrived exactly on time, none of the other guests arrived. The long driveway was empty except for their car. As Bill looked down the driveway, the front door burst open. Their master stood before them, and maybe it was because Bill was afraid, but it seemed to him that Mr. White looked larger than usual, superior to both Bill and his wife. He was wearing a light robe, closed in front. Bill wasn't sure there was anything under the robe, since he could see how Mr. White's muscles were all through the fabric. "Welcome. Come in, make yourself at home. So glad to finally meet you, Mary." He extended his hand to Bill's wife. She shook his hand and answered, "And I'm glad to meet you. You have such a beautiful house." Mr. White laughed and replied, "Well, he definitely lacks a woman's hand, but that's hard to fix with so much work," he said and patted Bill on the shoulder. "Please come to the dining room. I need to discuss something with both of you." "When should we expect other guests?" "I didn't see any other cars in the driveway," Bill asked. "No other guests. Consider yourself and your wife my honored guests," Mr. White said with a slight grin. The three left the spacious hall and headed into the large dining room. The table could easily seat 16 people, maybe more. Bill and Mary sat opposite Mr. White at the far end, closer to the door. "Let me start by saying that the senior partners have been very impressed with your work over the past 5 years." Mr. White looked Bill directly in the eye as he spoke. "Your recent promotion to junior partner reflects the confidence we have in you. I want to talk to you today about the next stage of your career." Bill looked slightly puzzled. This was clearly not the conversation he was expecting right now. "I want to take you to my team with immediate effect, to begin preparing to one day occupy the corner office. This would be a big step forward for you. If you can handle it, I can guarantee that one day you will become a senior partner." When he wasn't yelling at you, Mr. White could be very charming. He had a velvety deep voice, slow and smooth. He was almost seductive. Bill sat silently. He was not prepared for such an outcome. "What do you say?" Mr. White concluded. "Do you want to get into the big leagues?" Bill sat there, slightly stunned. He opened his mouth to speak, and all that came out was, SP. "Thanks." "Let's take that as a yes," Mr. White snapped, clapping his hands. "This is worth noting. Mary, honey, if you walk through that door behind you, there should be chilling champagne and 3 glasses. Can you bring them to us?" Mary quickly stood up and left the room. She looked more excited than Bill. Bill seemed to come to his senses. "Sir, I am very grateful, but I must say that I am very surprised, especially considering what happened this week." He spoke almost in a whisper so that Mary would not hear. Mr. White smiled widely. "Bill, I'm not going to punish you for having some weed. Plus, it's now completely legal. Marcus is a good guy, and he explained that he just wanted to help you. No hard feelings." Bill's face broke into a wide smile when Mary returned carrying champagne. After Mr. White had filled all their glasses, he raised one into the air, for the beginning of a very fruitful cooperation. All 3 clinked glasses and took a sip. "Now," began Mr. White, "let's eat something. I'm dying to meet my new team member." The variety of treats Mr. White prepared was impressive, with fruit, cold cuts, cheeses, and a variety of sauces to sample. Everyone filled their plates and sat in the backyard near Mr. White's pool. What surprised Bill most was the difference in Mr. White's behavior outside of work. He was charming, funny, witty, and proved to be an impeccable host. Mary and Mr. White seemed to really like each other. It turned out that Mr. White was also a real estate investor. When Mary found out about this, she started talking about all her current real estate projects. In fact, the conversation hardly concerned Bill. Mr. White and Mary seemed to have a mutual attraction. "That's a good sign, right?" Bill thought, relaxing from the tension of the last few days. Mr. White laughed. "Wait, Wait, save the presentation for next time. Let's discuss this week. Today is a day for relaxation and fun. Speaking of relaxing, I have a little surprise for us all. He got up and ran inside. A few moments later, Mr. White returned holding a small silver tray. One of the birds whispered to me that you two like to relax a little, so I prepared a treat for us. There were 3 large, rolled-up cigarettes on the tray. They weren't like the weak roll-your-own cigarettes that Bill had rolled himself. These were pre-rolled and seemed to be tightly stuffed. "Oh, great," said Mary. She looked very excited. "This is for you." He handed one to Mary. "And this is special for you, Bill." Bill took the rolled-up cigarette, but looked at Mr. White. "I don't smoke much, Mr. White. I have a low tolerance and never really liked it." Mr. White's smile faded slightly. "If you're going to work with my clients, you better get used to it. And turning down someone's generosity is a great way to leave a bad impression." Mary poked Bill in the side. "Don't be rude, dear. It's just to relax a little." "It looks like it'll take some getting used to," Bill said, leaning back in his chair, carefully examining the rolled-up cigarette in front of his eyes. Mr. White took a third rolled-up cigarette and took a lighter from his robe pocket. "To your health," he said, clicked the lighter, brought it to the end of the roll-up cigarette, and took a drag. Mr. White took a deep breath, filled his chest, and held the smoke for a few seconds before releasing a huge cloud of smoke coming out of his mouth. He coughed slightly, then handed the lighter to Mary. "To our hospitable host," said Mary, bowing to Mr. White with her rolled-up cigarette. She lit a rolled-up cigarette, took a deep breath, and held it. She didn't last as long as Mr. White and coughed a lot more, but she had a big smile on her face when she finished. Then both eyes turned to Bill. Mary placed the lighter in his hand and leaned back in her chair. Bill looked at Mary, at Mr. White, and then down at the rolled-up cigarette. "Okay, let's go," he said in an anxious voice as he lit a rolled-up cigarette. He began to take deep breaths, like Mary and Mr. White, but halfway through he began to cough violently, and this continued until Bill thought he was going to be sick. Bill sat up straight, his head hurt from coughing, and there was a terrible taste in his mouth. His face reflected his dislike. "You'll get used to it," Mr. White said playfully. Mr. White and Mary continued to quietly smoke their rolled cigarettes. Bill fell behind a little, already feeling dizzy. When Mr. White was halfway through smoking his cigarette, he extinguished it in a nearby ashtray. "Let's finish them later. Who's ready to swim?" Bill and Mary, both slightly high, looked at each other. Then Bill turned to Mr. Say. "I'm sorry, sir, but I didn't know we were going to swim. We didn't bring swimsuits with us." Mr. White thought for a moment. "I think I can find something that will suit you, Bill." "Mary, I think my sister left a swimsuit here, and it fits you just right. I'll be back soon." Mr. White entered the house again, and Bill turned to Mary. "Isn't this exciting? Working for Mr. White is a huge opportunity. He works with the firm's biggest clients," Bill said quietly, leaning toward Mary. Mary seemed to be waiting her turn to talk when Bill finished. "Bill Brandon said he would be very interested in investing, and he knows all the biggest names in town. This will be huge for my business, Brandon," Bill answered, tilting his head slightly. "Yes, so what? He told me to call him that." "What's the problem?" Mary said, slightly irritated. "Nothing. I've just never heard anyone call him that." And Bill was telling the truth. Even after all his hospitality, he didn't feel comfortable calling Mr. White Brandon. The back door to the terrace swung open and Mr. White walked in, still in his robe. "Okay, everything is ready. I put the swimsuits in the 2 guest rooms at the end of this hallway," he said, pointing to the left. "Bill, your suit is in the first room on the right. Mary, yours is in the second room on the left." "Thanks a lot." "Bill, let's go," Mary said, quickly getting up and heading to the door. Bill tried to get up, but fell back. He really had to get used to it. The second attempt was more successful, and he slowly walked towards the door. Mary was already changing in her room by the time Bill got to him. He turned the handle and entered. The room was a regular guest room with a king-size bed, a chest of drawers, and a bathroom. On the bed lay something like a bright yellow scarf. "This must be a joke," Bill said out loud. When he pulled it apart, he saw the Speedo logo in small, dark blue letters. Bill went out into the hallway and knocked on Mary's door. "It's me," he said, and turned the handle. The door was locked. From inside the room he heard, "Brandon." He replied, "No, it's me. I can't wear this swimsuit he gave me. It's too revealing. I feel like I'm on show." Mary seemed annoyed. She did not open the door, but spoke through it. "Bill, this is the biggest opportunity we've both had in a long time. Don't be rude and ruin it. I need Brandon's help to sell these apartments, and I won't let you ruin this for me. Okay, honey, just promise you won't laugh." Bill was amazed. Mary never spoke to him like that. She even swore at him. It wasn't like her at all. "Expensive?" he said. There was no answer. He turned and returned to his room. It would be funny if he weren't in that suit. The Speedo was probably 3 sizes too small. Bill wasn't a big man, but this was too much. He looked inside to see the tag Boys L. "God, I'll look funny in this," Bill said to himself. A short knock on the door. "Hurry up." Mary must have already finished changing her clothes. Bill walked around the bed and opened the door. "Mary has already left." Bill took a deep breath and said, "To hell with all this." Bill timidly walked out into the backyard. Mr. White and Mary seemed to be already swimming. When Bill approached the pool, he saw that they were standing shoulder deep in the water and talking. Mary laughed out loud at something Mr. White said as Bill approached. They stood very close to each other. Bill looked at his wife, and it almost looked like she wasn't wearing a swimsuit at all. Before he could think about it, Mr. White called out to him, "Bill, Mary says you know how to make a margarita according to all the rules." He paused for a moment, trying to distract himself from his wife's figure. "Yes, I can. I was a bartender in college." "Well done," said Mr. White. "Why don't you come into the kitchen and make us all some margaritas? Everything you need should be in the bar." Bill turned and headed towards the kitchen. He didn't want a margarita at all. All the ingredients were not in the bar. Bill eventually found everything he needed after checking what seemed like 100 cabinets in Mr. White's kitchen. Who keeps their drink stuff everywhere? Bill was surprised, squeezing limes into a cocktail shaker. After preparing the drinks with a lime garnish and a straw in a highball glass, Bill found a serving tray, set out the drinks, and left the kitchen. Mr. White and Bill's wife finished swimming. They lay on 2 sun loungers next to each other, facing away from Bill towards the sun. As he walked around the sun loungers, Bill almost dropped the tray of drinks. The first thing that stopped him was Mary's swimsuit, or rather the lack thereof. The swimsuit was white, or at least it was. The water made it almost transparent. The triangle-shaped top left little to the imagination. Apparently, Mr. White's sister is a small woman. Stunned, Bill was at a loss for words. He just stood there holding a tray of drinks. "Wow, thanks, Bill," Mary said, smiling as she picked up one of the cocktails and took a sip. "Perfect, as always, dear." "See, I told you he makes great drinks," she suggested, turning to Mr. White. She didn't even seem to notice his swimsuit, much less comment on it. Mr. White motioned for Bill to come closer. Bill immediately walked to the other side of the chairs. Mr. White took the drink from the tray. Bill was more struck by Mr. White's appearance than by his own wife. Boss Bill's body looked like it was carved out of wood. Massive pecs, 6-pack abs, and his dark skin glistened from the pool water. If Bill didn't know better, he would have thought Mr. White was still a professional athlete. Mr. White also wore a Speedo. His swim trunks were also white and matched Mary's swimsuit. They also seemed too small, but for very different reasons. Bill tried not to look and quickly looked away. After taking a sip, Mr. White nodded, indicating that Bill had done well. "Bill, great drinkcock. Why don't you sit down and relax a little?" said Mr. White, although he did not look at him. Bill shook his head to focus. There were only 3 sun loungers, 2 on one side of the pool, which were occupied by Mr. White and Mary, and one on the opposite side, in the shade. Placing the tray on the table, Bill walked over to his chaise longue, intending to drag it over to the other two. The lounge chairs were teak wood with concrete legs. Bill grabbed the leading edge and tried to lift it up. Nothing. The sun lounger did not give way. He couldn't move it alone. "Hey, guys!" Bill called Mary and Mr. White across the pool. There was no answer. Bill didn't want to ask Mr. White to help because they were guests in his house. He sat down in a lounge chair and took a sip of his margarita. "Bill," Mr. White shouted from the other side of the pool. Bill's eyes widened and he sat up. "Go inside and get us all a towel. They're in the linen closet at the end of the hall." Mr. White didn't even look up at Bill as he spoke. Feeling no need to argue, Bill stood up and walked towards the back door. When he walked, he felt better than when he sat. He felt nauseous in a sitting position. Reaching what he thought was a linen closet, he opened the door. A small pile of laundry fell out of the closet and landed on Bill's face before settling on the floor. "Crap," Bill exclaimed. After he put the 3 towels down, Bill began to fold all the laundry back and put it in the closet. He began to feel like a maid. Having completed the task and closed the door, Bill turned and walked back down the corridor, holding the towels in his hands. When he went out onto the terrace, he saw that Mr. White and Mary remained in their places, but with one small change. Mary was lying on her stomach with her swimsuit top untied at the back. She was all shiny, apparently. Her body was covered with sunscreen lotion, which stood on the table next to Mr. White. "She really looks amazing. I can't believe she's wearing a swimsuit like that," Bill thought. Bill handed each one a towel. Mary rolled it up and used it as a pillow. Mr. White put it aside as if he didn't need it. Mr. White appeared to be getting up because the ashtray with the remains of their rolled cigarettes was on the small table next to him. "What do you say to finish smoking them? I don't like to see a good thing go to waste," Mr. White suggested to the couple. "I think it's a great idea," Mary said. Her voice was low and relaxed, just like that night when they smoked together. She slightly raised her torso and sat on her elbows. Mary's skin looked soft and pale on the sides and lower chest. Bill thought that he had never seen his wife naked in daylight. "Is it okay if I skip this round, guys? I didn't really like the first puffs," Bill said, rubbing his stomach for clarity. "If you're going to work with my clients, you need to increase your tolerance." "The only way to do this is to smoke more." Mr. White handed Bill the rest of his rolled-up cigarette. Mary did not look at Bill. She gently blew smoke rings. "Okay, go ahead," Bill said, not quite sure about it, but he wanted this job and everything that came with it. He was ready to do whatever Mr. White asked of him. Bill took the rolled-up cigarette into his mouth and lit it. He decided that the smartest thing to do was to puff lightly while sitting. Approaching his lonely lounge chair, Bill already felt that he was high. After a few minutes, he smoked the rolled-up cigarette to the end and decided it was time to put it out. It didn't take long for THC to show up. After a few minutes, he felt the world begin to spin too quickly. His body became cold, but he was sweating. Bill closed his eyes and tried to relax. Without realizing it, he fell asleep on the sun lounger. The sound of the splash woke Bill up. He wasn't sure how much time had passed. Looking across the pool, he saw that Mary and Mr. White were gone. Bill noticed the top of her white swimsuit on the ground next to her lounge chair. Within seconds, Bill felt an uncontrollable urge to vomit. He wasn't going to do this in his boss's pool. He ran into the house as quickly as possible, and as he passed by, he saw Mary and Mr. White in their jacuzzi next to the terrace. Bill rushed past them with barely a glance and headed into the room where he was changing clothes. All that followed was violent vomiting. Bill has never had it so bad. A few minutes later, when the vomiting had stopped, Bill stood up and left the bathroom. He sat on the bed to compose himself, looking out the window at the backyard. Bill could see Mr. White and his wife in the jacuzzi, but only from the shoulders up. They seemed to be having a great conversation, Mary laughing and Mr. White smiling. It was great that they got along. Suddenly, Bill's stomach lurched again. He turned around to get out of bed and get to the toilet, but fell to the floor. He crawled to the bathroom as quickly as possible. It's too late. He didn't make it to the toilet in time and vomited all over Mr. White's guest bathroom. When the vomiting stopped, Bill assessed the damage. Cleaning up will take forever. Luckily, he found cleaning supplies under the sink. After sitting in the bathroom for a while to make sure the vomiting had stopped, Bill began cleaning. Cleaning up vomit while high is terrible, Bill thought as he wiped up the dirty towels and put them in a garbage bag. Walking through the garage, he found a trash can and disposed of the evidence. Bill was tired, high, and smelled like vomit. He thought it was time to pick up Mary and go home. He walked out into the backyard and noticed that the sun had begun to set and there was very little daylight left. He also did not see Mary or Mr. White. They weren't in the hot tub, but Bill noticed the remains of their swimsuits in a pile by the back door. Bill followed the wet footprints inside, stopping at the stairs in the hall. He slowly walked up the stairs, the house still spinning before his eyes. Holding onto the railing for support, he reached the top of the stairs. Standing on the landing, he looked around the corridor in both directions. On the left, he saw one open door at the end of the corridor. Bill walked slowly towards the open door. He heard some noise from inside, but could not recognize it. Approaching the room, Bill looked around the corner and saw his wife, completely naked, giving pleasure to his boss. Bill was stunned, standing in the doorway in silence, holding onto the frame. It was possible to shoot him with a pen. Bill looked at this with a stunned and horrified expression on his face. The sight of his wife servicing her boss turned him on. Suddenly, Mr. White looked away from his mistress and looked straight at Bill. "Damn it, Bill, if you're going to look, at least come in and sit down," he said, nodding toward a chair in the corner of the room positioned so he could see the bed. Bill's wife didn't even look up from what she was doing. From the new corner he moved to, Bill saw his wife from behind. "Sit on me," Mr. White commanded. Bill's wife stood up. After a short pause, Mr. White said, "Turn around so your husband can enjoy the view." This was the first time Bill had been able to see her clearly since they were at the pool. Her eyes were clouded. There was an expression of bliss in them. She let her hair down from her ponytail, half of it stuck to her face from sweat. Mary's body was completely covered in a thin layer of sweat. She turned her head to Bill and quietly said to him with an expression of bliss in her eyes, "He's so big, so many things." Bill could only watch. Bill's boss turned around and went into the bathroom, turning on the shower. The couple remained in silence. Bill didn't know what to say. His wife just lay there in the afterglow of the best sex she'd ever experienced, unable to speak. A few minutes later, Mr. White emerged from the bathroom, dry but still completely naked. Bill found something very threatening in his nakedness. "You know, Bill, I think we can forget about all the troubles," Mr. White began. "Marcus is a good guy, and after talking with him, I realized that he just wanted to help you. My other partners and I believe that you have a great future ahead of you in our company. I couldn't imagine this wonderful couple breaking up. On Monday, we will meet and discuss new responsibilities for you and introduce you to your new team. We want you and your wife to stay with us for a long time," he finished, turning to Mary, who was still lying naked on his bed. Bill was still in shock from what happened and didn't know what to say. "Thank you, Mr. White. I won't let you and my partners down," he squeezed out, trying not to tremble in his voice. "Wonderful. Well, tomorrow is your big day. You should go home and get some rest," he pointed to the door. Bill looked at his boss with confusion and then at his wife. She was wrapped in a blanket on Mr. White's bed and seemed quite unwilling to leave. Her face expressed complete bliss, and she did not pay attention to him. "I need to discuss your new responsibilities with Mary. You'll get it back safe and sound tomorrow after work," Mr. White continued. Not knowing what to do and feeling very vulnerable next to the powerful body of his boss, Bill knew that he would have to leave without his wife, whether he wanted it or not. "Okay then," Bill said weakly. He approached the bed to kiss his wife, but she turned her face away at the last moment and he kissed her on the cheek. Bill stopped for a moment and then turned around and walked away. When he got to the car, He realized he hadn't changed back into his clothes. He was still wearing the tiny Speedo. He didn't dare go back inside to change his clothes. As he pulled out of the driveway, he thought that whatever new duties awaited him tomorrow, he probably wouldn't like it. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.